I've been so busy with the pandemic news and our civil liberties project called Fight the Fines and fighting against attempts to deplatform us that I haven't had a chance to follow up on some other ideas and other stories. I had an idea for a contest for Canada's worst mayor, almost like a reality show, maybe where viewers would vote on it. I see that as the ultimate reality show. It really is so hard to choose. There are so many worthy contestants for worst mayor. City halls across Canada are like weird laboratories where the worst possible politicians are grown. And then the worst of the worst, move on to provincial or federal politics. They're all disasters. I think each of us is probably a little biased to choose our own mayor as the worst, just because we're the most familiar with what they do on the ground. I live in Toronto, and I'd nominate our mayor, John Tory. I think he's been the absolute worst in the country, indeed in the world, for any big city in terms of lockdowns. At least that's what the BBC says. Toronto, the most locked down city in the world. So I think my guy is in the running, but you have to agree, listen, I do agree that the city of Victoria and their atrocious mayor and city council really are a strong contender for Canada's worst mayor. I mean, look at this, just the latest story. BC's capital cancels scheduled Canada Day programming in wake of Kamloops residential school discovery. And look at this on the CBC story. Warning, this story contains distressing details. That's a new one. The news is often distressing. The CBC doesn't say that for many distressing things. They're just telegraphing their political position here and giving you a hint about what your views should be too, don't you think? Let me read. Victoria City Council has decided to cancel its scheduled Canada Day programming this year following the discovery of what are believed to be the unmarked burial sites of children's remains near the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. Now, let me stop for a moment. Just FYI, that's the distressing part in the story that they wanted you to brace yourself for. Originally, the city had planned virtual programming to mark the day due to COVID-19 pandemic gathering restrictions. Instead, the city said it will produce something for broadcast later this summer featuring local artists and guided by local First Nations. Let me stop there for a second. So they weren't even having anything anyways. That's how lockdown-ish, that's how awful and authoritarian the city council was anyways. There actually wasn't anything to cancel because they already canceled it. They're double canceling it. Stamp, no erases. They're super duper triple canceling it. I'll read more. As First Nations mourn, and in the light of the challenging moment we are in as a Canadian nation, following the discovery of the remains of 250 children at a former residential school, Council has decided to take the time to explore new possibilities instead of the previously planned virtual Canada Day broadcast, Victoria Mayor Lisa Helps said in a media statement. Now, hold on for a second. By the way, can you see what Lisa Helps has done? She has otherized First Nations people. She's said, because of what happened there, we're not going to celebrate Canada Day. Well, who are you to say that? Aboriginal people, Indigenous people are just as Canadian as anyone else. In fact, you could say they're the most Canadian people. They were here first. You are deciding that there will be no Canada Day because of an issue on a First Nation. Who the hell are you to kick them out? You have made them the other. You have kicked them out. I don't even think she's realizing. Now, there are some questions to be asked about that Kamloops residential school story. The chief there says the remains of 215 people were found through ground-penetrating radar. Now, the press release was written to create an emotional reaction, and it sure did. I mean, Jody Wilson-Raybould, one of my favorite people, she read the press release and assumed that 250 children were killed. That just wasn't in the press release. Many other media assumed it meant mass graves, like a calamity that was covered up. That was later corrected. You'll see a full report by our West Coast reporter, Drea Humphrey, on this. She went to Kamloops to do a deep dive on this story. Drea is very compassionate and does a great job of the story, and I want to learn more about it. I know she does too. One of the questions we'd like to know is, was this a regular cemetery? The school was around for almost a century. People, including children, do die, especially 100 years ago, naturally from diseases, from accidents. Was it like a normal cemetery like that was maybe just lost in time? Or was there something criminal or negligent about it? Who were they buried there? Was it like over the course of 100 years? I'm really curious, and I want to keep an open mind. I think any policy that takes children away from their parents to raise them in a culturally different way, I think that's offensive to our values of freedom and family unity. However, I have to say I do know several graduates of these Indian residential schools who tell me it was the best thing to happen to them, really, like a boarding school, one that gave them many practical skills for modern life, they tell me. One senior lawyer in Edmonton told me it actually saved his life and it put him on a path. He said he'd never have been a lawyer without it. That's what he says. But look, let's keep an open mind to what's going on in Kamloops. Let's see what the facts actually are. Dre's got a great report coming up on that. But does any of this justify renouncing our whole country? Renouncing our patriotism, renouncing our national day? I don't think so. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.